Hello, this is John with Theology Ed. I'm going to try to make this one quick, but it is related to the predictive programming and what we're seeing unfolding in the U.S. right now as civil unrest does accelerate. We're getting a lot of ugly rhetoric, and at least in Minneapolis and some other places, but especially Minneapolis, there's noteworthy protests that have turned violent, and we've seen a shooting again yesterday. Okay, this was the second shooting. This man was shot in the street and by an ICE agent, and this happened and prompted more unrest, and people are of course very upset about this, and we're seeing tensions between local police and the federal agents, the ICE agents. So this is what we've talked about before, where potential for state versus federal government, or law enforcement versus federal, I don't want to call them law enforcement necessarily, but federal representatives who can be armed, because we're also going to see possibly with an Insurrection Act at some point military on the street as well. But I guess in that context, it would be a form of law enforcement. Anyways, but the federal versus state/local government tensions, that's where we get a real threat of what would be a civil war. Now, we've seen in predictive programming that this type of thing is pointed at, right? We saw the get out of the U.S., the people in the underground, and us come up, and they're asked, "What are you people?" And we are Americans, and it's the name of the film Us, but you see the U.S. in it, and so we have the Americans. It's the uprising of the Americans. Get out, the uprising of the Americans. And the McKittrick line was antebellum, before the Civil War. You should have left before the hunt, right? You get this idea that you can't go. Nope. Okay, and there will be a point where you can't get out. We saw that, but there's a point. All of this points to uprising in the U.S., possible civil war, political violence, one side versus another, and this sort of thing. We also saw in Barbie, we saw the Kens having their own battle, one against another, during an election cycle, so that while they're battling and while all these tensions are happening, the Barbies, which I think are representing something like the progressives or the progressive ideals, they end up winning in the election and regaining power due to all the chaos out there. Now that could be in-house fighting among Republicans, for example, in the right, or it could also represent some symbolism of larger international war, possibly civil unrest, right? But it's fighting here that is represented, but we see this in various places. We also see it in IPEC Goat 2, of course, the division of the United States. We'll just keep this in mind with the lightning splitting things causing a division. But if we go to the classroom calendar right here, we have the shot taken at the Trump character. Remember, I have a video that I posted in 2020, well before the assassination attempt, about the potential of failed assassination attempt planned on Trump in July, and it didn't happen that year, but in 2024 we had that shooting, and I think the back wall then is hinting at what came in 2024 with the reemergence of Trump and the assassination attempt that helped him win the election and so on, and is perhaps, at least according to the narrative, motivated some of his more extreme behavior and viewing the left versus right as almost a war and this sort of thing. So you have the divide, D-I-V, and here's the I, like a cursive I, okay, D-E, divide, and the it's orderly on the left, but after that it starts to take off and you get the chaos, and that's over here. And so we see the Trump character comes in the story, and when he reemerges after the failed assassination attempt on him that nips his ear, we get in the subsequent time the division. We enter the phase of chaos in the second term of his presidency, and that's what we're seeing. Of course, you go outside the classroom, and we see here Donald in the Psalm 23 text is written in a way we see Donald. D-O-N-A-L-D. Donald. And there's the lightning, that which splits or divides, like on the board with the lightning going between the brain halves. And right out of here, we get the doomsday clock and the split American flag coming together, as if the two things are pointing to the same thing. What doomsday is the internal division of the United States, bringing it down with one star, a state possibly, or probably representing a single state that triggers this or takes off, instigating or being sort of the beginning of the division of the country. And there's the division of the states, which I think is related to Donald splitting. Okay, so all that's pointing to the Trump division caused by Trump. And we saw the same thing in Leave the World Behind, right? In Leave the World Behind, you had the white family returning to the White House after they left for a while. And so that was the first Trump term. He leaves. He's welcomed back in the second time. The daughter asks, why did you let him back in? And it was the right thing to do. That right there is what's going to screw us over in the end. What is? The second term of Trump, when Trump comes back to the White House. And we're seeing it. And so what's happening here is we're seeing the division of the United States escalating in accordance with their predictive programming. Probably why they're warning, get out of the U.S., right? To get out of the U.S. because of what's coming. And the question is, well, will it continue? Is this avoidable? Will it be cut short by something else, like possibly is indicated in Leave the World Behind? Good questions. But it helps to understand the mechanism that they are using, the method they're using to instigate and create this these problems, right? Let's see. Maps. Let's just go to... hold on. I'm going to do this. Map, USA, Google Maps. Okay. Here we are. Now, we pull up map of the United States. Why? I just want to have this in front of us while we talk about it really quickly. What are they doing? If you go back to even ancient philosophy, Aristotle, talking about what a healthy political state looks like, right? And the idea is you don't have representation if they get too big. You can't have representation, real representation, if they get too big, because the larger the population is, the less personal involvement you can have in influencing policy decisions and so on. And also, the larger that population becomes, when it takes on sort of the dimensions of an empire, what happens is the central authority, or the authority governing the whole body, ends up effectively almost being forced to be very, very weak or authoritarian and against the will of a large number of people, forcing them to do things that are incompatible with their values, interests, whatever. And so you end up necessarily becoming authoritarian when you become too big. If you look at the United States, you have a whole continent width here. We're going from coast to coast. This is over 300 million people living in here. People with widely varying views of what good policy should be, of what right and wrong are, so much so that each side now is growing hostile to the other side, and especially some certain key issues. And of course, immigration is one that is in the news a lot right now. And what all you need to create civil unrest in a country this big, you don't need massive false flag attacks necessarily. You don't need anything like that. You don't need really clever things happening. All you need is the central government, the president, for example, to just use force to make and compel people to all behave the same way. Because you can't get 300 million people plus in 50 states to do everything identically and be the same. And so what's happening is, because of the size and scope of the country and the differences of opinions among people and large groups of people, as long as the federal government continues strengthening civil unrest is inevitable. So the even before Trump, when Biden was president, you had Texas trying to control its borders in the way it wanted to as a state that was trying to limit illegal immigration. And the Biden administration was making that difficult and impeding their progress. Okay, and there was talk at that time about if Trump isn't elected, we in Texas may have to somehow resist the federal government. Some people even wanted him to secede, right? This sort of thing. And there was talk about what they were going to do if Trump didn't win, because they were going to be forced against their own desires to accept more and more immigration that's illegal when they didn't want to tolerate that anymore. And so what ended up happening is they felt like the federal government was infringing upon the state's ability to govern itself in its own, in essence, sovereignty or self-rule or self-government. And so this isn't just the right doing it to the left. This was the left doing it to the right. What the real problem here is not right, left necessarily. What it is the elites, if you want to put it that way, who are behind the government. I don't know, Trump and Biden don't make a difference. I mean, I know a lot of people hear that and think, well, they're radically different. Look, Trump is trying to save the world from illegal immigration, and Biden was doing the exact opposite. Biden had dementia. He wasn't doing anything. The people who governed the country were still governing when Biden was totally ineffective and not even knowing what's going on. The country didn't grind to a halt because the president wasn't competent. It kept functioning just like normal because the president's irrelevant. Okay, the real decision makers kept doing what they always would do, and that's how it works today. What's happening is the United States, the strategy that they're taking to divide the United States, is the increasing the power of the federal government and using its force more visibly, and its power more visibly, and trying to crack down on regions against their values. It's going to provoke civil unrest. It's inevitable, and that's something that's been long known. This doesn't require a PhD to figure out. And so what they're doing right now is they are increasing federal presence, right, in various places, and then coercively requiring states and cities that do not share the same values as the federal government that's in power at the time to act contrary to their values, which is going to necessarily generate civil unrest. I mean, the real solution here, neither side is really on board with this, it doesn't look like. So whichever side gets in power in the United States, again, because they're under the same authorities, ultimately, they're going to use these coercive powers right now to try to consolidate power, more and more power, in the hands of whatever administration it is that they favor. And it's centralized. The real solution is to chill out, decentralize, and allow people in their own cities and states and regions to govern in their own way, right? And according to the values of the people there, rather than having a guy over here in Washington, D.C. telling people in Los Angeles and Minneapolis who their neighbors can be, okay? Again, that's not me being a leftist or anything. I'm not. I don't vote because I see both sides as being under the power of the same financial, corporate, and occult interests. However, what it is it's advocating, I guess, what you would call sort of something like a strong view of local and states' rights, right? So historically, it would probably fall more on the side of the conservatives. But right now, the conservatives are the ones who want to federalize everything, declare an insurrection act because people in Minneapolis aren't fans of ICE agents in their city, and crack down everybody who won't submit to the federal government. That is a guaranteed way to provoke civil unrest and ultimately civil war. At some point, if every time they have more and more protests, the federal government sends more and more troops in, and more federal agents in, and is willing to use more and more violence and so on, you'll eventually have a state say, we're leaving. We're gone. We can't be in the United States anymore. We do not approve this, and we will fight back. That's the only option they will feel like they have. And that would go either direction. If it wasn't Minneapolis, if it was the other way around, forced on Texas, in contrary to their own interests and values and whatnot, you would end up having a similar outcome. Maybe not with the same kind of protests happening, but with states resisting the federal government ultimately, and the state government. All right, but that's what's happening. That's what they're doing. There's, of course, more to it than that, and hopefully we'll cover more of that in the future. But we're watching the divide unfold. And this, as it continues, this is why when she sends out the apple takes away the liberty of the people, right? This is her magic is basically to destroy the United States. And his hands are tied, who was president at the time the film was released. So the idea is the United States is in trouble. And so he's sweating because of this that's coming. And later on in the film, we see, I don't remember where exactly it's at. Not back here. Well, doesn't matter. The apple. It looks like the apple is at the base. Oh, we're getting close. So I'll just talk while it's going. But the apple seems to strike, and I suppose it's the Statue of Liberty, or the like the torch of the Statue of Liberty, indicating that the light will eventually go out and the freedom disappears. I'm not going to find this right now. Or where am I? No, I'll look for it later. But anyways, so what we're getting is the division of the United States, which ultimately leads in the film to the collapse of the United States, right? So just like the church had fallen back here, as Rahor Kuat character comes out, we'll get the church collapse behind him, and the crown of thorns disappear here, and the whole USA is under a tidal wave. And in the process of being destroyed as well. Okay? Either way, that's what we're at. Like, subscribe, share, take care, and have a good one.